Ever since the sudden rise of gacha games going mainstream in 2020, it feels like every major player in this market is trying to get out their own big-budget open-world type game. Genshin Impact kickstarted it all and pioneered the future of gacha gaming. Tower Fantasy launched to a fairly positive reception. Even though it mainly only gained popularity with the Chinese player base, it was enough for Hoda Studio to fund their next big project, with Neverness to Everness launching soon. Wuthering Waves launched in 2024 and admittedly had a rough start, but has blossomed into a giant in this industry. Infield has been teased since 2021 and has only begun its conquest to join the big leagues. We've just seen an early test build of Silver Palace, a Victorian-themed open world with a fairly distinct setting. The second test branch for Azure Promilia will be arriving soon. Ananta is still nowhere to be found. Bluepock, the developer for Reverse 1999, is allegedly making an Unreal Engine 5 game. Netmarble wants a slice of the pie too, with Mongol Stardive launching probably soon. These are just some recent examples for the arms race of getting out a developer's own game with the potential to go mainstream. It's an emerging market for sure, with some very exciting times ahead. What if Project Moon came in swinging and made an open-world gacha game where you roam the city in a 3D environment, taking in all of its grimy and dark atmosphere? Don't lie to me, I know you want that. While many are concerned about the oversaturation of this niche, accompanied by the rather tribalistic crowd wanting their own favorite game to succeed in place of a competitor's, I'm here to let you know my opinions on the matter. This trend to create more high-budget open-world type gacha games is actually a good thing. I'd say make more of them. Everyone should be making their own big releases and have a small slice of the market. On the other hand, I think it's rather foolish to pray for the downfall of a game you don't like, because once you peel back the curtains, you'll notice that there's a lot of benefit to having a variety of games at your disposal, and that more competition is good, actually. Taking a brief detour from open world games, I'd like to give a brief mention to this video's sponsor, Brown Dust 2. I personally done an independent review on the game a while back and had a lot of good impressions on it. Brown Dust 2 is a fantasy RPG with vibrant anime-style 2D art and dynamic turn-based gameplay. It's currently running its 1000 days update, meaning that the game is celebrating its 1000th day since launch. This update brings in story pack number 20, Into the Abyss. Every main story pack contains its own explorable world space with different activities. In addition to some special login bonuses, this patch introduces the new character palette, a debuff extender from the dark element. The outcome of a fight in the game is typically decided within just a few turns, so this new kit has some interesting applications. Also, I'm not gonna beat around the bush here. This game goes quite hard on the fan service element. Probably some of the best in the gacha market. You can expect highly detailed 2D artwork, and this extends to the new costumes that will be introduced in this patch as well. Don't miss the special 1000 day celebration. Brown Dust 2 is available on Google Play, App Store, and of course PC. Use my link in the description or pinned comment to download and start playing the game today. Why don't we start from the beginning and work towards how we got to this point? These days, it feels like a lot of big budget titles that have been brewing in the pot of development and marketing have been dropping like flies in the overall gaming sphere. You never looked at mobile games and can even fathom they can operate on the same level. MiHoYo was the first to change this, of course. They've already beaten everyone to the punch with Honkai Impact in 2016, where its graphical and story presentation was already considered quite advanced back then. They struck gold yet again in 2020. If you ask me, Genshin Impact was a lightning in a bottle. It both coincided with a pandemic that a lot of people were staying home wanting to find a meaningful new hobby to get invested in. At the same time, the quality of the game far surpassed basically any mobile game that had been released before it. On top of that, it wasn't infested with ads or microtransactions. It had actual gameplay with mechanical depth, a pretty world to explore, and really memorable music. It actually felt like a premium game you would find on a console platform. The pandemic raged on for the next 2 years or so, and Genshin simply rode the wave to solidify its position in this highly lucrative market that it discovered. Now, Genshin has a fairly spotty track record when it comes to player appreciation. Who can forget about the infamous one-year anniversary it had in 2021, where players basically bullied MiHoYo into submission for 10 extra pulls. However, I don't believe it even mattered all that much in the end. The formula that the game had was rock solid, that a small piece of drama like that has no chance of shaking its foundations. You can dislike MiHoYo for their stingy tactics, but you cannot deny that their framework is what paved the way for future competitors to follow and maybe improve on. Releasing a new explorable region once a year with a fully voiced and animated storyline, great music, great atmosphere, and side content littered throughout is kinda insane if you think about it. Best of all, they gave these out for free. You don't have to pay a monthly sub to unlock new content like some MMOs. You don't have a weird time gate that prevents you from consuming the new content unless you paid extra. You can actually see your investments when you do spend money on the game put to good use. It wasn't lining the pockets of some executives at Aniplex or something. Realistically, you can experience the full extent of its lore and world building for free, and the asking price is the optional gacha element to get more characters to expand your gameplay with. Their formula was effective, yes, but it wasn't a shortcut to success. You actually had to create a really high quality product and maintain it in a consistent pace that satisfies players. It's something that only a more experienced team can accomplish. However, it did demonstrate that this formula can be extremely lucrative if it pays off, and thus opening the Pandora's box for this market of mobile games to go mainstream. You can actually see the lasting influence that Genshin's designs left on the market, primarily with its UI and monetization techniques. You'll get the sense that a lot of them have similar layouts, how the gacha rates are sorta similar, and how their update cycles are handled in around the same manner. That being said, MiHoYo never patented any of these ideas, so if the future games can use the framework to create an even better job, I'd say go for it. With that being said, I still think it's worthwhile to point out that without this, you wouldn't have these. Now, given what we know about the currently released games and the upcoming ones in this niche, we know that a number of these titles with an open-world 3D anime formula will be joining the list. Now, not all of these games are fully focused on open-world elements, but some of them will have a sandbox or a commission-based system that set it apart. After all, you can't expect to create a complete replica of a game. There's still the matter of standing out and carving out a niche within the niche, so that people will have a chance to get a distinct experience for every game they play. It's also extremely important that despite using the same formula that Genshin originally pioneered, everyone plays games for different reasons, and while there should be a core framework that the game uses, mainly the open world bit, there are a lot of things a game can focus on. Some people want complex mechanics and difficult content, and some just want to turn their brains off after a long day. Some want deep and rich stories and world building to get invested into, and some don't really care about the story all that much. Some want to have long-term satisfying grinds, and some just want to click a few buttons and be done for the day. All of these are valid approaches and reasons to play a certain game. What I'm trying to say is that a lot of these games can look fairly similar on the surface, especially when they're announced with their trailers. They may offer slightly different things that are not apparent on the first look. You might brush off Mongol Stardive as just another Genshin clone, but I'm saying that it's worthwhile to at least try it out to see if it really is just another clone, or does it offer something new. I have no doubt that even more of these ambitious projects will continue to be released into the market, and I'm curious to see if they can stand out in their identity despite having so many options already out right now. Let's finally discuss the situation we have at hand. Regarding this emerging market in mobile gaming, I think everyone can agree on one thing. A monopoly in any industry is bad. It's bad for the consumers, and it's bad for the health of that industry. It allows that company that holds the monopoly to treat their customers however they see fit, since there's no one to keep them in check. What if we were to apply the same logic to gacha games? Let's say the almighty Gacha X swoops in and takes everyone's players away. Maybe it is just a better product and didn't achieve that through any means of trickery. Now let's imagine that everyone just unanimously agreed that Gacha X should be the one and only game to play, so they leave whatever their game is and only choose to play that one. The result is that no other gacha game except Gacha X shuts down due to lack of funding, and this single title reigns supreme over everyone else. Now that it's got no competitors, what might be a logical thing for the executives of Gacha X to do now that there's no one standing in the way of their conquest? Well, naturally, they would sneakily jack up the prices and the aggressiveness of its monetization. I mean, where else are you gonna go? It's my way or the highway. You better suck it up and keep playing, because there's no other game in town. In an ideal world, every player would welcome any new additions to the same gaming niche they occupy, and treat each new game as a new member of a bigger family. However, the reality is not that. The world can be a turbulent place right now, and many find reprieve in finding meaning in being part of a virtual community, guarding over the place that they will call a second home. In many cases, they have made the game part of their personality, so any critiques you make against the game will feel like an attack on them as a person. In addition, any new entries to the gacha market will feel like a threat to the game they've already gotten attached onto, and so they will unrelentingly push back against any narrative that the new game in town might be better in any way. I'll tell you how I see this. The companies that run these games are businesses, and you're the consumer. That's all your relationship with these games will ever amount to. Of course, many of these games are really good products, and I'm okay with endorsing them. With the open world gachas being the biggest in this market, the problem of tribalism is magnified more than usual. There are plenty of bots and online influencers that will gladly profit off your emotional vulnerabilities by pushing a one-sided narrative that one game is better than another. We're actually seeing a pretty big example of this unfolding right now, or I guess infolding would be a better term. Love and Deep Space currently has a stranglehold in the female-oriented gacha games niche. No other title even comes close to the degree of quality and fidelity it has. Now, just like how Genshin first opened the way for gacha games to go mainstream, Love and Deep Space has basically done the same thing, just from a different angle. At its core, I think the company behind it should be commended and rewarded for discovering such a big hit inside of the market. However, due to the fact that Love and Deep Space realistically has no competitor that can threaten them to a significant degree, Infold can really just do whatever they want, pricier cosmetics and gacha rates, or more aggressive player retention techniques. I mean, if you want a similar experience with actual semi-complex action gameplay and a dating sim with some extremely high-fidelity graphics, where else are you gonna go? It's just weird that despite the game clearly showing the overwhelming success in this niche, no other company has even seriously tried to break in. However, when the Love and Deep Space killer eventually releases, you bet that there will be a war of tribalism that will happen, just like the one we're seeing right now with the mainstream gachas. So here's something I think everyone needs to hear, regardless of what kind of game you play. If you don't like a certain game or company for whatever reason, that's perfectly fine. What is important to understand is that when you're currently playing a gacha game and another game or company is suddenly doing very well, even if you don't like them, that's actually a net positive for you. When there's competition, it's generally a good thing for consumers. You have more choice, you have more options, and you get to be more picky about which game to sink your time and money into. After all, would you rather run into the problem of having too few choices or too many choices? As said before, the original model that Genshin came up with is unique in that you actually have to create a good product in order to succeed, which is something that takes real skill to accomplish. When certain companies prove to the market that they can do a better job at something, naturally they would be rewarded for it. And so, competition within the market creates more incentives for companies to improve upon their game, to be better than the other options. Let's say that in response to saying the competitor get more spotlight, the company that's making the game you like now gives out a bunch of free rewards to try matching the generosity or quality of its competitor. And now, you have a better experience of playing your favorite game by doing nothing. What I'm trying to say is that you have nothing to gain by praying for the downfall of another game that you don't like. On the contrary, I think there's a lot of benefit in adapting the mentality that you should want a competitor to start gaining more ground, because it motivates the game you like to be even better than what it already is. Succeed even harder, so my game will treat me better. If the developers already treat you very well, better than the competition, well, that's a win for you as well. Again, you now have a better experience by doing nothing. But do you know what's not a good scenario for you? What isn't a win is if one game monopolizes the whole market, because by then there will be no competitors to keep a game accountable if they go over the edge and start treating its players poorly. The only winner here is the developer, who now has no reason to improve the game. However, given all this though, there is one possible nuance I want to bring up before closing the discussion. The thing about open worlds is that it's very easy to give off the impression that it's a big game with all sorts of content you can do. However, it's also worth keeping in mind that a big game may not be what everyone wants. Let's also face an ugly but unavoidable truth. Maintaining a live service game can take up a good chunk of your time when you want to fully clear its content to max out on your enjoyment or in-game rewards. Considering that the 6-week update schedule has more or less been normalized, new content being delivered at that pace is no easy feat, even on the consumer side. You would have new content to look forward to quite often. You can probably play like 2 or 3 of these if you happen to have a lot of time on your hands, but approaching 4, 5, or 6? That's pushing it. You either have to lose out on certain events or take breaks every now and then. Everyone will have finite time for hobbies, and when the number of options in the same market begins to bloat, you'll have to make some choices. Do I stop playing a game for now in order to focus on another? Trying to maintain every single one of these games as they come out is extremely unrealistic, and will probably burn you out if you tried it. This means as studios join this market, they will eventually reach a breaking point that, due to the finite amount of players that can exist at any point, some games that either don't offer much new things or those that stick to too safe of a formula will eventually be forced to face the reality that not everyone can play every game that comes out. Despite this, I think this is a good problem to have, at least for consumers. The formula is still there, except now, from the perspective of developers, you have to put in your unique spin on it to separate your work from the crowd. It pushes developers to make even more creative endeavors to stand out, since if they don't, they'll naturally be churned out in this saturating market. I think the worry that the gacha market will be filled up with slop games that copy the same theme and tones as the ones before it isn't too big of an issue, since people will be more critical against the games that don't provide the experience on the same level as the ones before it or put some innovation behind it. Again, it's hard to argue against the notion that having too many choices is worse than not having any choices at all. If you ask me, this is the best state that gacha gaming has been in. I'm gonna end the discussion by saying something that may sound a little uncomfortable. You don't owe anything to the company that you're playing their game for, and they don't owe you anything. Gaming is a hobby. A video game cannot and should not be part of your personality or identity. If you want to support a game with your time and money, then there's nothing wrong with that. As a customer, you are supporting a good product that has brought a lot of value to you. At the end of it all, I think you should be choosy in which video game to play. So with the expanding catalog of free games you have at your disposal, I think there's a lot of value to shop around and try out as many as you can. So I say this again. No, I don't think the gacha gaming space has too many open world type games. On the contrary, make more of them. Thank you for joining me today on this discussion video. Let me know what you think of the matter down below. If you want to catch more discussions and reviews on gacha games, subscribe to the channel. I'll be doing a review on Azur Lane and maybe Granblue Fantasy for some old school gacha action, so stick around for that. You can support what I do for as little as $2 a month on Patreon. As always, thank you for watching, be sure to spend moderately, and have fun out there.